112 years ago, America broke. It did not shatter into pieces, but it cracked open, and from that fissure, a new nation began to emerge, one we would recognize today. It is a shocking claim, but the evidence is stark. 1913 was the year that rewrote the fundamental rules of American power money and democracy. In a single dizzying spin around the sun, the country was irrevocably altered by a cascade of events. But together, they formed a perfect storm of transformation. From the way money was controlled to the way the government was funded, from how goods were made to how senators were elected. The America of 1912 was buried, and the America of the 20th century was born. It was a revolution, not of muskets and cannons, but of laws, machines, and ideas. This was not a slow, creeping change, but a sudden, foundational shift. Before 1913, the United States was a more decentralized republic, a collection of states with a federal government constrained by limited funding and indirect influence. Power was more diffuse, held by state legislatures, powerful industrialists, and local banks. After 1913, power began to consolidate, flowing steadily toward Washington, D.C., toward a new central bank, and toward mass movements of people and capital. The very architecture of the nation was re-engineered. The relationship between the citizen and the state, the worker and the factory, the rich and the poor, the nation and the world, all were redrawn in this single, pivotal year. Imagine a nation waking up on January 1st, 1913, and going to sleep on December 31st, 1913, as a different country entirely. That is the essence of this story. On that first day, there was no federal income tax, no Federal Reserve to manage the economy, senators were still chosen by political insiders in state houses, and the automobile was a luxury for the wealthy. By the last day, all of that had changed. A new economic and political operating system had been installed. This essay will explore these monumental changes: the Federal Reserve, the income tax, the assembly line, and more. The urgency of these changes cannot be overstated. They were responses to the chaos and inequality of the Gilded Age, a period of rapid industrial growth, massive fortunes, and devastating financial panics. Reformers in the Progressive Era believed the nation needed new tools to manage the complexities of an industrial society. What they built in 1913 provided those tools. But these instruments of control and order came with a price. They created new centers of power, new forms of authority, and new questions about the nature of freedom and democracy that we are still grappling with today. To understand our world, you must first understand the year that built its foundations. Well, for decades, the American economy had been a wild ride. It was a landscape of booms and busts. A rumor in New York could sink a Texas bank overnight. The Panic of 1907 was the final straw. It was so severe it required J.P. Morgan to personally intervene and organize a bailout to save the banking system. The crisis showed a modern economy couldn't live at the mercy of individual financiers or unstable local banks. The nation needed a lender of last resort, a central authority to stabilize and control the money supply. The answer, passed into law on December 23, 1913, was the Federal Reserve Act. The creation of the Federal Reserve was one of the most significant and controversial acts. It established a central bank with a uniquely American decentralized structure, a board of governors in Washington, D.C., and 12 regional reserve banks across the country. Its mission: a safer, more flexible, more stable monetary and financial system. The Fed could issue currency, Federal Reserve notes, and control the flow of credit by adjusting interest rates. This was a monumental shift of power. Control over the economy's lifeblood moved from private Wall Street bankers to a new quasi-public institution. Proponents like President Woodrow Wilson hailed it as liberation from the money trust. The Fed was designed to be independent of partisan politics, a technocratic fix. It aimed to smooth the business cycle, prevent bank runs by lending to struggling banks, and manage currency to promote growth. In theory, it would serve the public, not the wealthy few. It promised an end to recurring financial panics. But from the start, the Fed inspired deep suspicion. Critics, populist farmers, conservative business owners feared concentrated power. Who would control this new money machine? Public institution or a cartel of powerful banks? These questions never fully went away. The Fed created a new center of power that could steer the economy, influence elections, finance wars. The modern American economy, with all its power and peril, began here. For the first 124 years of its existence, the United States federal government operated on a shoestring budget. Its primary sources of revenue were tariffs, taxes on imported goods, and excise taxes, alcohol, tobacco. This system was not only unstable, fluctuating with the tides of international trade, but it also placed a heavier burden on working people, who paid a larger share of their income for consumer goods. The idea of a federal tax on personal income had been debated for decades, and was even briefly tried during the Civil War, but the Supreme Court struck it down in 1895. The government lacked a direct, reliable pipeline to the nation's wealth. That all changed on February 3, 1913, with the ratification of the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. The text is deceptively simple. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes, from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. With these few words, the financial relationship between the American citizen and the federal government was transformed forever. For the first time, Washington had the constitutional authority to directly tax the earnings of individuals' corporations, creating a vast and steady stream of revenue that would dwarf anything seen before. The initial income tax, passed later that year, was modest by today's standards. It applied only to the wealthiest Americans, less than 1% of the population, and the top rate was a mere 7%. It was sold to the public as a matter of fairness, a way to make the rich pay their share and to shift the tax burden away from the consumption of ordinary people. But its true significance was not the initial rates, but the principle it established. The federal government now had the financial engine it needed to grow into the sprawling, powerful entity it is today. Without the income tax, the modern American state is simply unimaginable. The consequences were immediate and profound. The new revenue stream gave the federal government the power to expand its ambitions. It could fund a standing army, build a modern navy, create social programs, regulate industry on a national scale. Just a few years later, the income tax would become the primary tool for financing America's entry into World War I. It severed the government's dependence on tariffs, fundamentally altering trade policy. And it shifted the balance of power decisively away from the states and toward Washington. The 16th Amendment did more than create a tax. It built the financial foundation for the American century. Well, while politicians in Washington were redesigning the nation's financial and political systems, a different kind of revolution was taking place on a factory floor in Highland Park, Michigan. In 1913, Henry Ford perfected and implemented the first large-scale moving assembly line to manufacture his Model T. Before this innovation, automobiles were built by skilled craftsmen who moved around a stationary chassis, assembling the vehicle piece by piece. It was a slow, expensive process that made cars a luxury item for the rich. Ford's vision was different. He wanted to build a car for the great multitude. The moving assembly line was a radical reinvention. Instead of workers moving to the car moved to the workers. The process was broken into 84 distinct steps. Each worker performed one simple task over and over as the chassis glided past on a conveyor. The results were miraculous. Build time plummeted from over 12 hours to just 93 minutes. Efficiency let Ford slash prices, putting cars within reach of the average American family. The automobile stopped being a toy for the wealthy. It became a tool for the masses. The leap had huge social and economic consequences. It fueled suburban growth, letting people live farther from work. It created massive new demand for steel, rubber, glass, and oil, transforming industries. It spurred paved roads and highways, reshaping the American landscape. But the assembly line changed the nature of work. Skilled artisans were replaced by unskilled laborers who endured mind-numbing repetition. The pace was set by machines, not workers. In 1914, Ford doubled wages to $5 a day, a move partly business acumen, to reduce turnover and to create customers, and partly social engineering. The bargain came at a cost. Work became depersonalized and exhausting. Factory floors became sites of labor management conflict. The assembly line created a new industrial worker and a mass consumer society. Its efficiency became central to the American dream, while its alienation became a central problem of modern life. In 1913, the richest man in America, John D. Rockefeller, was also one of the most reviled. His company, Standard Oil, had been branded a ruthless, monopolistic predator and was broken up by the Supreme Court in 1911. Facing public scorn and a legacy of rapacious capitalism, Rockefeller sought a new way to use his immense fortune. Advised by his associate Frederick T. Gates, he decided to create a new entity that would apply the principles of big business to the practice of giving. In May 1913, the Rockefeller Foundation was officially chartered with a breathtakingly ambitious mission: to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. This was philanthropy on an entirely new scale. Before this, large-scale charity was often tied to specific institutions, universities, churches. The Rockefeller Foundation was different. It was global. It was scientific. It was systematic. It was not content to simply alleviate suffering. It aimed to eradicate root causes like disease and ignorance. Armed with an initial endowment of $100 million, the equivalent of billions today, the foundation set out to fund cutting-edge medical research, public health campaigns, educational reforms. It was a private organization with the resources and ambition of a small nation-state. The foundation's early achievements were stunning. It launched a campaign that virtually eliminated hookworm disease from the American South. It founded the first schools of public health at Johns Hopkins and Harvard, professionalizing a field that barely existed. It funded research that led to a vaccine for yellow fever, saving countless lives. The foundation's work demonstrated a new model of power: private wealth directing public policy and shaping scientific progress. It was soft power operating outside democratic accountability, guided by a handful of experts and trustees. The Rockefeller Foundation's creation in 1913 marked the birth of modern strategic philanthropy. It set a template followed by Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and generations later, Bill Gates. This new form of giving raised profound questions. Could private foundations become a shadow government, setting public priorities? Who decides what constitutes the well-being of mankind? While its impact on global health and science was positive, the foundation also represented a concentration of influence, fortunes from one era shaping the next. That was the turn of an era. In the America of 1913, anti-Semitism was casual and pervasive. Newspapers openly stereotyped Jewish people. Vaudeville stages caricatured them. Jews were barred from certain hotels. They were excluded from clubs and from many universities. This simmering prejudice boiled over in the case of Leo Frank, a Jewish factory superintendent in Atlanta. He was falsely accused of murdering a young girl, Mary Fagan. The trial, fueled by sensationalist journalism, erupted. Public hysteria swelled around the case. It became a flashpoint for anti-Jewish sentiment in the South. Frank was convicted on flimsy evidence. He was sentenced to death. In this charged atmosphere, a Chicago lawyer, Sigmund Livingston, decided to act. He was appalled by systemic defamation. He believed a national, organized effort was needed. In October 1913, with support from B'nai B'rith, Livingston founded the Anti-Defamation League. Its mission was clear: to stop, by appeals to reason, appeals to conscience, and if necessary, appeals to law, the defamation of the Jewish people. The ADL's further objective: secure justice and fair treatment for all citizens, to end unjust discrimination and ridicule of any sect or group. The founding of the ADL marked a crucial evolution in America's civil rights struggle. It shifted from passive endurance to active organized defense. The ADL pioneered methods that became standard for advocacy groups. It monitored newspapers and media for defamatory content. It confronted editors and publishers. It persuaded them to adopt more responsible standards. It worked to remove offensive stereotypes from plays and from films. It provided legal assistance and launched public relations campaigns to educate Americans about prejudice. It understood the fight had to be waged in the court of public opinion as well as in the courts of law. Born of a specific crisis, its vision was universal. By linking the fight against anti-Semitism to broader justice for all, it laid groundwork for intergroup coalitions. Its 1913 creation signaled marginalized communities would no longer accept prejudice silently. They began building modern institutions to defend their rights, to demand their place in the American social fabric. The ADL was an early, powerful example of organized advocacy essential to the long, ongoing struggle for a more just and inclusive society. Section 7. Seeds in a Distant Land. The Echoes of the Aliyah. While America was remaking itself from within, ripples from a movement far across the ocean were beginning to reach its shores and connect to its future. The year 1913 fell within the period of the Second Aliyah, 1904 to 1914. These were not the religious pilgrims of old, but young, idealistic, and often secular pioneers, fired by the nascent ideology of Zionism. They dreamed of escaping the persecution and pogroms of Eastern Europe and building a new Jewish society based on agricultural labor and self-sufficiency. They were establishing the first kibbutzim, reviving Hebrew as a modern spoken language and laying the institutional foundations for a future state. In 1913, this movement was still small in number, a few tens of thousands of settlers in a land populated mostly by Arabs. To the great powers of the world, it was a minor, almost invisible phenomenon. But its significance was far greater than its size. These pioneers were creating facts on the ground. They were purchasing land, building towns like Tel Aviv, and creating political parties and self-defense organizations. They were planting the seeds of a national home that, just a few decades later, would erupt into one of the world's most intractable conflicts. The events of this period would become the foundational narrative of the State of Israel. The connection to the American story of 1913 is twofold. First, the plight of Jews in Europe, which fueled the Aliyah, also drove millions to seek refuge in America, enriching the nation's cultural and intellectual life. Organizations like the ADL were created in response to the same global currents of anti-Semitism that inspired the Zionists. American Jews felt a growing connection to the pioneering efforts in Palestine, providing crucial financial and political support. Figures like the future Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis were becoming leaders in the American Zionist movement, linking the fate of this distant settlement project to the corridors of power in Washington. Second, the seeds planted during the Second Aliyah would grow to have profound consequences for American foreign policy in the 20th and 21st centuries. The establishment of Israel in 1948 and the subsequent conflicts in the Middle East would become a central preoccupation for the United States, drawing the nation into a complex web of alliances, wars, and diplomatic crises. The small, determined efforts of a few thousand pioneers in 1913 set in motion a chain of events that would eventually demand the attention of the global superpower that America was then in the process of becoming. The story of modern America and the story of the modern Middle East, though seemingly separate in 1913, were already becoming intertwined. For more than a century, the United States Senate was designed to be a firewall against the passions of the masses. The nation's founders intended it to be a more deliberative, elite body representing the interests of the states rather than the whims of the populace. To ensure this, The Constitution dictated that senators were to be chosen not by the people, but by their state legislatures. This system, however, had become riddled with corruption by the late 19th century. Senatorial seats were often bought and sold, with powerful corporate interests and political bosses controlling the outcomes in statehouse backrooms. The Senate became known as a millionaire's club, disconnected from and often hostile to the needs of ordinary citizens. The public outcry against this system grew into a powerful grassroots movement. On April 8, 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified, fundamentally changing the nature of American democracy. It mandated that United States senators be elected by the people thereof. The power to choose senators was taken out of the hands of a few hundred state legislators and given to millions of voters. It was a massive transfer of political power, one of the most significant in the nation's history. On the surface, this was a clear victory for democracy. It made senators directly accountable to the electorate. It promised to break the grip of special interests and make the Senate a truly representative body. Supporters celebrated it as a fulfillment of the promise of a government of the people, by the people, for the people. But the 17th Amendment also had unintended consequences that continue to shape our politics today. By severing the formal link between state governments and the federal government, it weakened the principle of federalism. State legislatures lost their primary tool for influencing national policy. Furthermore, direct elections transformed the nature of Senate campaigns. They became expensive, media-driven, mass-market affairs, creating a new dependence on campaign fundraising and opening the door for new kinds of influence from wealthy donors and powerful interest groups. In trying to solve one form of corruption, the amendment may have inadvertently paved the way for another. The change in 1913 made the Republic more of a democracy. Section 9. The Convergence. How 1 year forged a new nation. None of the seismic shifts of 1913 happened in a vacuum. They were interconnected, each one reinforcing and enabling the others. To see them as separate events is to miss the larger picture, the simultaneous re-engineering of America's economic infrastructure, political infrastructure, social infrastructure. The sheer convergence of these transformations in a single year is what makes 1913 so uniquely pivotal. It was the year the tools of modernity were all forged at once, creating a powerful new national apparatus. Consider how these pieces fit together like a complex machine, each gear turning the next. The 16th Amendment, authorizing the income tax, provided the fuel for the modern state. The 17th Amendment, creating the direct election of senators, nationalized the political system that would steer that state. Together, they centralized power in Washington, shifting it away from state legislatures and local communities. The federal government now had both the money and the popular mandate to act on a grander scale than ever before. This new, more powerful national government was no longer a distant, limited entity. It was becoming a central player in the lives of its citizens. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve Act created the financial operating system for this new, enlarged state. The Fed could manage the currency and credit system to support a national industrial economy, smoothing out the panics that had previously crippled it. Crucially, it also gave the government a powerful mechanism to finance its expanded ambitions, including the immense cost of war, by managing debt and controlling inflation. The assembly line, in turn, provided the industrial muscle. Ford's revolution in mass production created a model for mobilizing the nation's manufacturing might, a capacity that would prove decisive in the world wars to come. This new architecture of power, a funded state, a nationalized politics, a managed economy, and an industrial base capable of mass production, was complemented by new social software. The Rockefeller Foundation demonstrated how private wealth could be systematically deployed to shape public policy and scientific progress on a global scale. The ADL pioneered the modern advocacy group, creating a template for how organized citizens could influence law and public opinion within this new centralized system. Even the distant echoes of the Aliyah signaled America's growing entanglement with global affairs, a stage on which its new powers would soon be tested. Section 10. The Legacy of 1913. A World Remade. The America that entered 1914 was fundamentally different from the one that had begun 1913. It was a nation equipped with a powerful new toolkit. For collecting money, for managing an economy, for producing goods, for electing leaders, and for projecting influence. The timing was uncanny. In August 1914, the guns of August thundered across Europe, plunging the world into the Great War. The systems put in place in 1913 would be tested almost immediately, and they would prove essential in transforming the United States from a regional power into a global hegemon. The long-term effects of 1913 define the American century. The income tax financed not only World War I, World War II, the New Deal, the Great Society. The Federal Reserve managed the economy through depressions, recessions, booms, becoming arguably the most powerful financial institution on earth. The mass production model pioneered by Ford became the engine of American prosperity and military might. The direct election of senators permanently altered the political landscape, contributing to the rise of national political parties and the modern, media-driven campaign. The philanthropic model of the Rockefeller Foundation was replicated countless times, creating a vast, influential, non-governmental sector. But the legacy of 1913 is also one of conflict and controversy. The concentration of power in the federal government and the Federal Reserve has been a source of continuous political debate. The dehumanizing nature of assembly line work fueled decades of labor strife. The influence of big money in politics, a problem the 17th Amendment sought to solve, merely changed its form. The civil rights battles launched by groups like the ADL are still being fought. The seeds of conflict planted in the Middle East have grown into a forest of challenges for American foreign policy. The tools forged in 1913 to solve the problems of the Gilded Age created the characteristic problems of modernity. Ultimately, 1913 stands as a stark reminder of how rapidly a nation's destiny can be reshaped. It was not a year of war or revolution in the traditional sense, but its impact was just as profound. It was a year of foundational reconstruction. The leaders of that era, in their effort to tame the chaos of their time, built the systems that would carry the nation through the immense challenges and opportunities of the 20th century. We still live in the house they built. Its architecture continues to shape our economy, our government, our society. To understand the power and the problems of America today, one must look back to that single transformative year, when the old republic cracked open and a new world began.